Like, I remember when the money wasn't there, forced me to say you 50. I got you.
They still do that.
Gave my lawyer money there when I fight my case. You know, I ain't got to get into all that, but bro made sure he made a way for me to be straight.
Lil Durk kept it down for Jam in this way until Jam betrayed him by turning around. Everything has changed now. A recent video that shows Jam pleading for his life has gone viral. It's emotive and unvarnished, and the internet is posing the following query: is Jam's story over? Because if we know anything about Durk, it's that he doesn't tolerate disloyalty. Let's dissect everything. Once one of Lil Durk's most devoted warriors, Jam may have been the rat who brought down the entire enterprise. Now, he is pleading for his life. Because if we know anything about Durk, it's that he seeks retribution. However, we must examine the facts that most people miss before delving into the drama of the federal case and the reasons why the streets are demanding Jam's head. Because this was meant to be family, not just some random guy who got caught up. The culture was meant to be based on this kind of commitment. However, the individuals who can harm you the most are frequently the ones who are closest to you. Genuine conversation. Lil Durk and Jam have a long history together. For example, long before any of us were ever aware of these animals' identities. We are discussing childhood friends, guys who grew up together in the same communities and had similar challenges. The same lack of resources, the same brutality in these neighborhoods that molds young men. Jam described how Durk was like a brother to him in a 2023 interview with DJ Jerry, creating music for neighborhood get-togethers and block parties before he became well-known.
Like, I remember when the money wasn't there, forced me to say you 50. I got you.
They still do that.
This was in the past, when Durk was just another young chick. Attempting to use his rapping abilities to create a name for himself, they were simply neighborhood friends, watching out for one another, working together, and hoping to escape the hood together. They weren't thinking about record deals, federal cases, or any of that serious stuff. Then life occurred. Furthermore, Chicago living is no joke. Jam was convicted of attempted murder in 2010, when he was only 17 years old and received a sentence. We won't get into the details of what occurred because that's between him and the streets. But what happened after is what counts. You see, most friendships end here. Most people move on after their homeboy is imprisoned for more than 10 years. They make new acquaintances, new priorities, fresh lives. The letters cease to arrive, the phone conversations get shorter, the visits stop happening. Out of sight, out of memory is just the reality of the streets. Durk, though, no homie, was unique. He never forgot his first day sitting in that cell as his career took off. He started earning real money, and he built his empire. And we're not simply talking about keeping him on the books or providing some commissary money. We're talking about the kind of devotion that makes legends. Lil Durk offered support that was just unprecedented during Jam's whole 12-year campaign. The majority of rappers will not even assist their own blood relatives in prison. Durk was moving differently. However, this man was paying for legal bills. And as you are all aware, excellent attorneys can be costly, particularly in instances as severe as attempted murder.
Gave my lawyer money there when I fight my case. You know, I ain't got to get into all that, but bro made sure.
However, the funding was just the first step. Durk had a comprehensive welcome home gift ready for Jam when he eventually left the jail gates in February 2022. We are discussing the kind of homecoming that most people can only imagine. Durk first purchased a home for him, not just any home, but a place where Jam could rest, rebuild his life, and find some security after almost 10 years in prison. After that, he got him a vehicle so he could go about on his own, take care of his business, and begin to restore his life. But Durk didn't think that was enough. As a welcome home present, this guy proceeded to give Jam $50,000 in cash. $50,000. Durk just gave it up as if it were nothing since he valued his devotion so much. That's more money than most people see in a year.
He said, Jam, get out that jam, I'll give him 50, he ain't gotta ask again, bro. Like, you know what I'm saying, he ain't gotta ask, bro.
This kind of devotion was so uncommon and sincere that Durk even made mention to it in his songs, particularly in King Von's song Back Again, where he rapped, "Get out of that jam, I gave him 50. You don't need to ask again." Consider this. Durk was so pleased of his ability to keep his homeboy in check that he wrote a song about it for everyone to hear. Jam's appreciation also looked genuine. He openly praised Durk's devotion, stating, "Bro did his share. Faux show played it too much. For that, I adore you, buddy."
Bro, like, played this part for sure, like, overplayed it. I love bro for that. Can't.
Additionally, this was about more than simply money and material possessions. Jam joined the OTF family as an artist, thanks to Durk, who included him on songs like Focus and No Complaints in 2022 and 2023. He was providing him with a respectable way to earn money, advance his profession, and avoid difficulties. Everything seemed to be ideal. The buddy was at home. He was regaining his balance. He belonged to a prosperous company, and he had the kind of devoted buddy that is hard to come across on the streets. This was meant to be the joyful conclusion to a tale of true friendship persevering through the most trying times. However, that changed on October 24, 2024, then everything was different. Lil Durk was arrested on federal murder-for-hire allegations in Florida at that time. Not a few state fees, not a local beef. Federal charges are the kind that may result in life in prison or worse. The crime was linked to a 2022 conspiracy that killed Rondo's cousin Servia Lil Pab Robinson and targeted rapper Quando Rondo. 5 other members were also swept up. Now, when the federal government shows up with a case like this, they bring facts, not just hypotheses and suspicions. Recordings, documentation, the kind of evidence that might bury you. Everyone in the streets, however, was wondering how they knew so much about OTF's internal operations. The whispers began at that moment. At that point, people started to inquire who had spoken, who had been on board, who had been recording talks while wearing wires. And sadly for Jam, he was the center of attention. Rumors began to circulate after Durk was arrested that Jam had been working with the police, supposedly wearing a wire for years to collect evidence against Durk and other members. These were real accusations made by actual members of the hip-hop culture, not simply random online trolls. Chicago rapper King Yolo Wack 100 and DJ Akamiks were among the industry people who began accusing Jam. These guys have connections, so they don't simply make charges. They had references. They are the first to hear about things.
You know, we learned a lot when all this came out, man. You know, there's been a lot of allegations, you know, about people snitching. You know, so the main person they're talking about snitching is OTF Jam.
While Wack 100 said that Jam flipped after receiving a fresh gun charge, scholars asserted that Jam had been carrying a wire since his 2022 release. According to the idea, Jam struck a pact with the devil to avoid facing additional jail term when he was caught up again soon after his release. The most devastating proof, however, was found in a video that went viral on October 30th, 2024. It purportedly showed Jam being very apprehensive near Durk, and social media users speculated that he was carrying recording equipment. Social media reactions were harsh, with many interpreting his body language and stating things like, "Gosh, he's moving so strangely that they must not be able to read body language." For many individuals, this video became the smoking gun. They saw a man who was obviously uncomfortable, obviously concealing something, and obviously not behaving like the devoted friend he was meant to be. Instead, they saw a person who may have been documenting all meetings, conversations, and moments of trust for the federal government. The hypothesis also seemed to be supported by the legal records. A charge brought in a U.S. although Jam wasn't specifically identified. The district court in Los Angeles implied that one OTF member had been functioning as a confidential informant. However, everyone is aware of how these federal cases operate. To shield their sources, at least until the trial, they employ code names and initials. The personal betrayal was what caused this claimed breach to be so terrible, not simply the legal ramifications. This was neither a casual coworker or a guy from the organization's outskirts. It was said that this was family. Durk had raised, bolstered, trusted, and embraced this cat into his inner circle. According to the claims, Jam may have been recording and giving federal investigators access to every discussion he had with Durk following his release, including every time they spent together and every piece of information he was granted as a trusted member. Consider how frigid that is. You are imprisoned for 12 years. You are held down by your homeboy in ways that most people never encounter. He greets you as if you were his biological brother, and you assist the government develop a case against him in return for that loyalty. People never forgive such kind of treachery in the streets. Additionally, never forget, the response from the hip-hop community was as anticipated. In a society where working with law enforcement may result in lifelong exclusion or worse, and where snitching is seen as worse than murder, the accusations made against Jam were greeted with outrage. People on social media went wild, analyzing every bit of information, every rumor, and every idea of what really transpired. Jam was supported by those who said there wasn't enough evidence. However, the majority had already decided they thought he was a rat. Additionally, in this society, rats are not forgiven. The streets are intolerant. The data that began to surface was really astounding. So let me explain just how deep this rabbit hole goes. The street responses were even more bizarre. Let's start by discussing how the government were handling this investigation, because if you comprehend their approach, you can see why individuals were so certain that they had insider knowledge. Lil Durk was charged with more than just a few minor offenses in the federal prosecution. OTF was portrayed as a violent criminal organization that conducted commerce. They were attempting to demonstrate a pattern of organized criminal action, not simply one instance. The details of what supposedly transpired were outrageous. On August 19, 2022, 5 men with ties to OTF allegedly followed and trailed Rondo throughout Los Angeles as if he were a target. They pursued his black Cadillac Escalade in 2 separate vehicles before firing at least 18 bullets. including from a fully automatic rifle, when they apprehended him at a petrol station. His relative was slain, but Quando remained unharmed. However, this is what made everyone suspicious. How did the federal government know so much about the preparation, coordination, and fallout? How did they have access to such specific details on an allegedly covert operation? Several industry sources said that they had a snitch in the team as the explanation. When WAC 100 revealed what he believed to be the true situation, he didn't hold back. He stated, "The ironic term, F Jam, refers to a person who was wired. He was caught up in the gridlock." Real conversation. WAC 100 has been around long enough to understand how federal cases and snitches operate, so you had best pay attention when he begins talking about them. WAC stated, he worked for 12 years, left, was questioned, and claimed to have been honest. He also bought him automobiles and gave him $50,000. This. Said that there is no smut on his name and that he has never been a rat. He had been arrested in a weapons case before he flipped. WAC presented a timetable that was quite suspect. He said that Jam had worn a wire for 2 full years, essentially from the time he was released in 2022 until Durk was arrested in 2024. He reportedly wore a wire during the previous 2 years, from 2022 to 2024. After being released in 2022, at the same time as the Quando incident, yes, he therefore caught up right away. Consider how disgusting it is. He may have been filming everything for the federal government from virtually the minute Jam left jail. When Durk was throwing him a welcome home party, buying him vehicles and homes, giving him $50,000 in cash, and integrating him into the family. Every discussion, each and every meeting, hidden recording devices may have tainted every moment of true brotherhood. Jam's purported assistance has a straightforward explanation. After being released, Jam allegedly discovered a fresh gun case and chose to flip rather than serve further time in jail, according to WAC 100. Although the specifics of this new legal issue remained mostly secret, records indicate that Jam was arrested in May 2023 on a warrant connected to his prior case. The problem with cats who have served significant time in prison is that they will stop at nothing to avoid returning. 12 years in prison is a long time, and when you've experienced freedom once again, the prospect of going back to a cell may cause you to do actions you never would have imagined. Knowing the streets of Chicago better than most, King Yella dissected some of the psychology that may have led to Jam's potentially disastrous decision. This gave the narrative a whole new dimension that made readers wonder about everything.
OTF didn't help when OTF Jam baby mama was murdered while he was locked up, and it had him thinking the worst about that situation.
According to reports, Durk ordered the shooting death of Octavia Redmond, Jam's baby mom, on July 19, 2024. Purportedly after learning that Jam was collaborating, despite the lack of concrete evidence connecting Durk or OTF to the incident, a 15-year-old was charged with her murder. However, the timing sparked conversation. Rumor had it that when Jam learned of Durk's new case, his baby mom had called him for legal assistance, but Durk reportedly didn't answer. If it is accurate, Jam may have begun to believe that OTF wasn't really family at that point. King Yella explained how even the closest of friends might become adversaries under certain circumstances.
I done did my last bid 4 years, but they ain't do me. So I felt the type of way when I knew you had money. Not meaning that I want to do some snake to you like that, but in my head, maybe. Not no snitch, but I might want to do something to you.
That viewpoint demonstrates the complexity of these street ties. Even when someone is devoted and kind, resentment may grow if you begin to feel as if they are not there for you when you need them most. In Jam's situation, this resentment may have left him susceptible to pressure from the federal government. However, the proof of Jam's purported collaboration went much beyond conjecture and speculation. Prosecutors claim that their informants' recordings were crucial in establishing the case against Lil Durk. Having someone who could provide the kind of hard proof that is admissible in federal court was more important than just having someone on the inside. When a song purportedly recorded by Jam appeared, with lyrics that seemed to allude to Durk and violence, things became even more bizarre, although no one could confirm if it was authentic or when it was recorded. Several websites claimed that this was essentially a diss track that the purported lyrics included the following lines: "We're not F gonna fight and just be rhyming to murder. Me, a rapper, so feds will have something to put in their song. Smirk is the voice. You heard what he said, so bullets behind it." These lyrics went viral on social media, where users interpreted them as evidence of Jam's disloyalty. Posts claimed that Jam had produced a song in which he squealed on Chicago rapper Lil Durk and other suspects in the King Von Get Back attack. It remains to be seen if this recording was indeed evidence or just misinterpreted. The tension reached a point that someone actually spread false information on social media that Jam had been shot and murdered. Although the story was disproved, it demonstrated the level of ire and scrutiny Jam was subjected to. It was evident how much animosity the accusations had sparked by the speed with which people believed and disseminated information about his death. The underworld even turned the incident into memes and jokes, For example, social media mocked Jam with remarks like this when it was said that he was seen eating McDonald's during a federal questioning. Bro figured out Durk was craving fries and a Big Mac. Although it may seem trivial, the hip-hop community uses comedy and cultural criticism to further alienate people who break the code as a way to deal with these types of betrayals. Jam's quiet, meanwhile, was making matters worse. Jam remained silent for months after Durk's imprisonment, neither confirming nor refuting the rumors that were being spread about him. His lack of public appearances and social media activity only served to increase conjecture over his whereabouts and the true nature of his involvement in the case. Durk was in federal jail at the time and could have been sentenced to life in prison if found guilty. A significant amount of the evidence against him appears to originate from insiders who were familiar with OTF's inner workings. Truth, lies, and federal ties. Jam eventually came out on Instagram stories in December 2024. Denying that he had lied to Durk and asserting that the truth will be revealed when the court filings were made public. He made a blatantly defiant statement, "You're going to see that. I'm not how the feds got onto us or constructed their case when the discovery is made. I will release the documents as they will reveal everything." However, Jam went on the offense and began blaming others, even the man who had showed him so much devotion. Rather than just rejecting the accusations and moving on, Durk was essentially thrown under the bus by him, saying, Durk shouldn't have visited the relevant crime scene if he didn't want to be implicated. People's minds were racing after hearing that phrase. Just 2 years ago, this same guy was preaching endlessly about gang loyalty. Now, he's essentially claiming that Durk caused his own legal issues. You don't anticipate that kind of reaction from someone who is meant to be a devoted family member. Jam also accused Buna and Jerry and other members of creating false rumors about him. Additionally, he specifically targeted Nikki, Nicole, and Lexio, two women with ties to the crew. This guy was essentially destroying relationships with everyone by behaving as if the whole corporation had betrayed and abandoned him. The most significant aspect of Jam's statement, however, was his assurance that the legal discovery records would establish his innocence and reveal the identity of the person who had provided the FBI with their information. This was a daring assertion that placed everything on a mind frame. Either those records would support him or they would further bury him. Jam's remark elicited a very divided response from the street. Some saw it as a last-ditch effort by a guilty man to assign blame and raise legitimate questions. Others began to speculate that the narrative could be more nuanced than it first seemed. But now everyone was waiting for the promised papers to fall, no matter where they stood. In the meanwhile, several intriguing developments in Durk's case began to bolster some of Jam's arguments. When references to Durk's song lyrics were taken out of a supplementary indictment in May 2025, the prosecution started to exhibit signs of weakness. Since the song was really recorded 7 months before to the event, Durk's defense team had been contending that the prosecution had essentially lied to the grand jury by citing the lyrics of Wonderful Wayne and Jackie Boy as evidence. This proved that the prosecution's case may not be as strong as they had stated, which made it noteworthy. There were considerable concerns about whether other aspects of their argument may be based on poor foundations if they were prepared to discard material that had been essential to their first presentation. Professor Eric Nielsen, who specializes in the use of rap lyrics in legal proceedings, strongly criticized the prosecution's strategies. He said that prosecutors were interpreting creative expression as literal confessions without doing adequate fact-checking, and he described their use of Durk's lyrics as dangerously careless. It's not helpful for the government's case when academic experts criticize federal prosecutors. Legal watchers, however, saw significant shifts in the prosecution's case presentation, which was the most intriguing development. The original charges, paragraph 9, which explicitly outlined the murder-for-hire payment mechanism, was entirely eliminated in the superseding indictment. WAC 100 claims that the original indictment's paragraph 9 was eliminated. This is what was said in paragraph 9. Defendant Wilson would pay the bounty or monetary reward and/or cause payment to be made for the killing of Senior, that is, PAB, on behalf of co-conspirators at the direction of defendant Banks. In essence, the indictment no longer contains the murder-for-hire clause. This elimination was significant because it raised the possibility that the evidence the authorities had previously relied on to prove Durk's involvement in the assassination may not have been as reliable as they first believed. We must now examine additional instances in which rappers' crews are accused of betraying them, in order to see why this whole issue is so important in hip-hop culture. Betrayal of this kind has occurred before, and the results are invariably disastrous. The most well-known instance was 6ix9i's involvement with the Gangsta Bloods of 9 Trey. 6ix9ine fully changed his ways after being charged with RICO and cooperated with the prosecution by testifying against his previous accomplices in order to get his sentence reduced. Because of his open and overt collaboration, 6ix9ine became a lifelong outsider in the hip-hop scene and a living illustration of what happens when you break the rules. Then there was the Gunna case and the YSL RICO case, which demonstrated how the culture may see even lawful actions that are technically correct as snitching. In December 2022, Gunna entered an Alford plea and was required to attest in court that YSL is both a gang and a record label, and you personally know that YSL members or associates have committed crimes to support the gang.
YSL is a music label and a gang, and you have personal knowledge that members or associates of YSL have committed crimes in furtherance of the gang.
Yes, ma'am.
Major rappers like Lil Durk, Lil Baby, Meek Mill, and Polo G unfollowed Gunna on social media despite his insistence that he wasn't collaborating, and the hip-hop world essentially treated him like a snitch. He is still working to restore his image in the culture after his career suffered a serious knock. However, these two occurrences were not the same as the F-Jam issue. In contrast to 6ix9ine, no one could cite any clear collaboration or public testimony. He made confessions in court without a formal plea agreement. Unlike Gunna, rather, the accusations made against Jam were mostly supported by conjecture, gossip, and circumstantial proof. However, the absence of hard evidence did not prevent the streets from making judgments. People who may assist police authorities are already viewed with suspicion in hip-hop culture. Therefore, many people just accepted the accusations against Jam as true without waiting for solid proof when they first surfaced. With more than 230 terabytes of digital evidence and 20,000 pages of reports, the case became even more convoluted, and Durk's trial was postponed until October 2025. This implied that it may be months, or possibly years before the discovery papers that Jam said would vindicate his identity were made public. Jam's location were a mystery for the course of this court drama, with many conjecturing that he was avoiding Chicago out of fear for his safety. His baby mama's death and the snitching accusations had made him a target from many sides. The case's wider ramifications extend well beyond the individuals concerned. It draws attention to the precarious situation that members of street-oriented hip-hop culture find themselves in when they must choose between survival and loyalty. King Yola Lade explained the psychology underlying these circumstances in a manner that actually made sense.
And got images. My OTF try to, you see, you know the GD, like, we don't give a, I ain't got no filter. You do something, I'm calling you out for it. That's what it is. That's how we was raised anyway. They'll try to keep they together so they won't look bad.
This comment demonstrates how the reality of facing decades in federal prison may sometimes clash with the necessity to preserve reputations and street credibility. Hip-hop's celebration of unwavering allegiance doesn't necessarily reflect the difficult choices individuals must make when the federal government shows up. Charleston White, who never holds back his provocative views, offered his usual unvarnished perspective on the matter.
Nobody laughing at Durk like they were laughing at me when I went to jail. Lord have mercy. So ain't nobody laughing at Durk. Now it ain't funny. Now your favorite rapper go to jail and look like he got a no bond like me.
Despite being consistently controversial, White's remarks represented a larger discussion in the hip-hop culture over the repercussions of combining street life with mainstream success and the accountability that accompanies power. There are still a number of important issues while we await the outcome of this case. Will Jam's promised discovery papers prove his innocence, or will they turn up additional more devastating evidence? Will the resources of the federal government prove to be too great for Durk's legal team to overcome, or will they be able to effectively refute the prosecution's case? Most importantly, what impact will this whole scenario have on the camaraderie and loyalty that have been at the heart of hip-hop since its inception? Relationships and reputations have already suffered, regardless of the outcome of the legal proceedings. Once cited as an example of unwavering devotion and true brotherhood, Durk and Jam's friendship has been shattered by accusations and suspicions that may never be completely dispelled. Their connection has been destroyed because of the trust that gave it such significance. Similar to this video, to learn more, click on the cards that are shown on your screen.